we talked a lot. We talked a lot about Homeland Security, defense. Some of these conversations touched on cyber, and I think that is a key piece to our discussion here today. So I'm here. My name's Tatiana Bolton. I work for Google and I do cybersecurity policy. And I'm here to introduce Paul Tortora, who is the Deputy Assistant National Cyber Director, who handles all things cyber workforce. I think for us, we're very happy to have been included and to participate in the White House Cyber Workforce Summit this year, and to play our role in expanding and strengthening the cyber workforce. For you, I think that's important because in terms of Homeland Security, cyber plays a huge role, and in that area, cyber workforce is a huge piece. I think we see it as a critical priority, because who is going to be implementing the policies that we put out, that the federal government puts out? It's the people, and for us, that's where we'll start today. Paul, I think, will walk through some of the information that he's taking in to develop the national cyber workforce strategy that should be coming out shortly. So, Paul, I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Tatiana. Thanks for those who stuck around, didn't want to get an early lunch. I am from the government, and I am here to help. In Spanish, it's "Estoy del gobierno, estoy aquí para ayudarle." So, for whoever asked that last session, I do represent Director Chris Inglis. He sends his regards. Thank you for inviting us to attend. As Tatiana mentioned, I'm the Deputy Assistant National Cyber Director, and my portfolio is the cyber workforce, as well as education and training, broadly speaking, across the nation. I don't want to bore you with too many slides, but I thought I'd at least frame what we're doing at the White House specifically for the cyber workforce, and broadly speaking for everyone. It is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so I like to say take some action today. So enable multi-factor authentication, change your password, make sure you're using a VPN if you're using the local Wi-Fi, which probably many of you aren't, but you should. So just a couple slides, and I'll be around later if you want to talk, since we actually are soliciting information from the public to inform our new national strategy to look at the cyber workforce. So Chris Inglis, actually, this is his guiding principles to me. For those, some of you do know me, I am actually on loan from the United States Naval Academy, where I'm the director of the Naval Academy Center for Cybersecurity Studies, and I've been teaching there for about 10 years, cyber education, and a number of other things, including intelligence and espionage courses, but also in the classified space. And I was a career naval officer, both in submarines and intelligence. So Chris and I go pretty far back. I did hire him at the Naval Academy between the NSA and the White House, so he's paying the favor back and asked me to take some of the lessons we learned in the classroom in Annapolis and see if we can broadly apply that across the nation. So his guiding principles to the entire staff which probably go to almost any element of the government, really is federal coherence. And so in this case, there are at least 30 federal programs that look at educating, training, bringing on cyber workforce. And so my task is, how do I take a look at all these agencies and then provide some coherence? And since this is the first year that we've had an ONCD, and I'm the first person to occupy this space, I'm bringing together interagency to do that. Improve public-private collaboration. As Tatiana mentioned, we had a White House summit this past summer, a number of cabinet secretaries, and the discussion was basically a call to action. And so 1/3 of the attendees were C-suite people and industry leading experts to talk about how can they assist with us. Aligning resources to aspiration, no surprise to the ma'am, trying to make sure we're using the resources best as we get them. But this goes to the first two, especially when we look at federal coherence, where are all these dollars going to, which training programs work best, and then increase present and future resilience. And the way I see that for the workforce is actually at the basic level of raising everyone's awareness on digital safety, what is cybersecurity. So this is starting at the fundamentals of K through 12 on up. Busy slide. We use this as the call to action this summer. Hopefully you don't need to read through all this. At the time, there was about 700,000 cyber vacancies this summer when we had the meeting in the White House. Just released in the last week or so, it's now 769,000. So that number is not going down. And so the call to action was, we've got all these openings, and that's nationwide. That's not just the federal government. So we have these 700,000 and growing cyber-skilled vacancies across the nation. This is a national security issue. So we need to take a look at that and make sure that every American has the opportunity to get into one of those fields, and then how do we provide the tools, the resources to help someone along the way, whether they're coming up through high school or they're trying to reskill later in life. How do we get someone involved and make sure everyone has that same opportunity? And so we think that a cybersecurity position should be open to anybody, and there shouldn't be no limitations on them, whether they're cultural, societal. We want to make sure we can take those away and encourage more people to get into this type of education and then into that skill. So part of Chris's task to me is reaching out, getting into the K through 12. Last week we had a summit conference at Hampton University to talk to HBCU. So we're looking at how do we broaden the awareness across the nation. And so Chris, for those of you that were aware of the summit we had this summer, Chris likes to talk about all, many, few, very broadly speaking, that our challenge is basically how do we make everyone safe while being able to take advantage of the digital environment, digital economy we have. So his model, all is everyone in this room, whether you're in cybersecurity or not. These are your kids, your parents, your cousins, your friends. Everyone needs to raise their digital awareness a little bit better to be safer online. So think of October Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but expand that throughout the year. How do we have a steady drumbeat? I'd like to say that when we change our clocks, which I think this might be the last time this year, I think, right? You change your batteries and your smoke alarm, so we should probably change your passwords, change something on your system, stop using the same password, do something active. But it's easy for me to say enable multi-factor authentication, but what does that mean when it gets down to the K through 12? So part of the task is the all. How do we broaden everyone's cyber awareness and digital awareness? And even the term cyber awareness kind of sounds too techy, right? So it's more than that, just it's digital awareness. The many are actually those maybe in this room. Your jobs, your skills, your vocation actually probably could use a little bit more awareness of how cyber impacts your decision making, whether you're doing the acquisition, you need to understand the supply chain, whether that device is some component that was made in China or some other location. So maybe you need a little bit better understanding of the acquisition process. Or if you're in the legal field, maybe you need to understand a little bit more about the decisions you make, whether they impact your privacy or data security. So the many is a lot of occupations and skill sets, which we think also need some infusion of cyber to make them safer at the decisions they make every day. And then the few is really those that are in cyber-skilled positions. So the number doesn't sound like few, 769,000, but those are the ones we want to actually find the tools necessary to get people interested earlier on in their lives into cyber and STEM as well, and then help them throughout their career, show them the opportunities, whether they're coming in a second career and later in life. How do we provide these opportunities to get those positions filled? Because ultimately it's about national security is what we see that as. So what does Chris has me doing? Basically last summer when we had this call to action, he said, all right, now we're going to develop a national strategy for cyber workforce and education. So we launched an effort actually just a couple weeks ago. Right now, I've got an interagency of about 80 plus people from 25 different agencies, and we're looking at the big landscape. And I've developed some lines of effort. One is the federal cyber workforce, which is also very needing. There's probably between 20 and 40,000 vacancies, depending on which statistics you use. So how do we address that? How do we address the way that people get into the federal government, pathways, on-ramps? How do we provide them opportunities? What are different ways of looking at bringing in people to the federal government than the traditional means? Because it's not working. Retention's tough. Competing with industry and others. So how do we make it more appealing, more attractive, and then retain the people that we get, as well as provide other opportunities? The Department of Labor, Department of Commerce announced a 120-day cyber apprenticeship sprint this past summer. It's had a lot of success, and we're looking for other ideas like that. The next thing is the national cyber workforce. So how do we assist that? How do we get industry involved and in partnership with us to encourage outreach and engagement, training opportunities, reaching different parts of cities that traditionally wouldn't get this level of education? And then as you go out in this circle, these spheres, is what is cyber education training for the nation? And then broadly speaking, what is cyber and digital awareness, and then how do we get that out? So what I've done is, what we have basically right now is weekly drumbeat of listening sessions. We're listening to federal agencies about what the challenges they seek, and then we're going to transition to discussions with industry. What are they seeing? Because the industry has similar challenges that we do. How do we bring in people early? How do we encourage more interest in cyber and STEM, and then push that out? And then we're going to actually, for those of you interested, see me after lunch. We actually sent out, I think for the first time ever in this aspect, RFI, request for information to the nation, saying, tell us what you think of how do we increase any of these levels of lines of effort, federal workforce, national workforce, broadly speaking, cyber education. How do we get to K through 12? How do I get my dad to stop calling me for IT support? So broadly speaking, there is an RFI out there. We've sent it to across the United States. I've got inputs from across the seas, not from China yet, but Australia. So how do we take that input? And then my team will spend a couple weeks looking at these aspects of cyber education awareness, which I don't think we've thought about before. We've usually been looking inside the federal government. How do we answer our own problem? In this case, we're reaching out. So Chris is really pushing on me and my team to get out, to talk to Americans from every level, find out why some schools have successful cyber competition teams and some schools don't even have a computer science class. So how do we balance that a little bit better, and how can we influence that? So my team is actively working on that. We hope to have a rough outline by the end of this calendar year, and then hopefully something in the new year. And then, as some of you know who've been in government, we then need some tool to implement that. So we're looking at how do we establish some type of national cyber director-led committee or group that can then make these actions stick and then provide a pathway to hopefully taking a decent stab at that 769,000 national cyber vacancies, which I think we will. So I have a couple minutes. I'm happy to take a question or two, and I'm happy to talk over lunch. I will be here this afternoon because this got me out of DC for the day.
And we're glad to have you here, Paul. Thank you again. Great briefing. I want to be respectful of the virtual audience where we have two great questions. Do you have programs specifically calibrated to reach out to the Hispanic-serving institutions? A. And then the second question is there now or will there be in the future a mid-career pathway for mid-career folks to join the government in a cybersecurity fashion, academics, faculty, scientists, et cetera?
So the first one, that's part of the discussion. So once again, we're collecting information from across the nation and federal agencies, and we're on several workshops that my team's going to, and one of them will be in San Antonio for the question that was just asked, to look at Hispanics. We didn't cover. We delved into the HBCUs last week at Hemp University, so we're going to go to University of Texas San Antonio at the beginning of the new year to talk about other ways. I'm in discussions with some of the nonprofit organizations that deal with Hispanic as well as African American and diversity outreach that are getting into training younger kids and getting to places in America which really haven't had any cyber education or outreach. The second question is we are looking at pathways in at the mid-grade level because that is actually where a large hole is. And so yes, we are. Once again, we're at the initial phases of our discussions. Yes, ma'am. I think you were next.
Well, congratulations to Chris and you for doing a great job. My question is, have you thought about workshops in congressional districts where you come in, the member of Congress, and you go to some school or some location and talk about all these opportunities? I think members would love this. It's great retail politics. I can't think of, I've been thinking for 5 minutes of some partisan reason why it's a bad idea. I actually think this would appeal to both Republicans and Democrats and be the only thing out there that does.
Yes, ma'am. No, I think this is I feel I'm in one of the safer occupations in the National Cyber Directorate because it is easy to get consensus. And I'll actually tell Director Inglis that we just take a look at that. We have, my team is me and someone else, but I think you're spot on. That outreach, especially in some of the congressional districts which have limited access. In DC, you have so many cybersecurity experts that transition out of Fort Meade or DHS CISA that just stay there. But as soon as you leave that orbit, there's not many places that have that same level of expertise. So I will actually take that back to Director Inglis today. Thank you, ma'am. Great question. I will be around if you want to give me good ideas, and I'm happy to share the link for the RFI that we've got out to the nation to take other great ideas. So.
And Paul, could you describe that 769,000?
So the 769,000. So that's It's collected by a group called cyberseek.org, and you can actually go to cyberseek.org and click on your state, and it'll show you the vacancies in your state, and then drill down how many how many jobs you have in the state that are listed, how many are vacant, and you could drill down a little bit better. So I don't have the data on what that. But basically, it's nationwide vacancies that are cyber labeled and that are still vacant.
But it's down to the lowest level all the way up to.
Yes, it sure is. Thank you again for your time.